All right, hello everybody. I recently had the opportunity to present data on our validity study looking at VASES and using VASES to interpret fees. And I received a question during the Q&A that I wanted to address in a video since I think it's something that many clinicians are going to have. The New York City Marathon is going on right now, so there's lots of clapping in the background. I apologize. So the question had to do with why should we move from severity ratings of mild, moderate, and severe to characterize pharyngeal residue, penetration, and aspiration, and move into something like a 100-point rating system or a percentage-based system. And there are several reasons: transparency, validity, reliability, and sensitivity. So I want to break down each one of these right now. So in terms of transparency, I think that using percentages is a little bit more transparent than using mild, moderate, severe. And this is because mild, moderate, and severe, while used widely, mean different things to different people. And in fact, they mean different things across different rating scales. So a mild amount of residue for one rating scale might be 5 to 25% of a structure being filled, but for another rating scale it could be less than 50%, or for another rating scale it might be less than 33%. So we're using these same terms, but they mean different things to different people. Comparing that to something like 20% of the vallecula is full, or it appears as though 30% of the laryngeal vestibule is covered. If we use the actual numbers, we all have a general sense of what it is that we're actually looking at. We might not be 100% right, but we have a general sense of how we are interpreting the data. So it's a little bit more transparent that way. In terms of validity, residue doesn't just jump from one severity to another, right? We don't just have a mild amount and then we keep filling it up and then it just randomly gets to a moderate amount. It's this continuous process. It can be a gradual kind of incremental increase in terms of how much residue is being filled or covering of a structure. And the analogy I think of is filling up a cup of water, right? We fill up a cup of water and it doesn't just bounce from one amount to another amount to another amount. We can slowly increase the amount of water that's filling up the cup more and more. And that's exactly the same with residue in the vallecula. We can slowly describe how much residue is being filled or covering of a structure. So that's transparency, that's validity. We also have reliability. So let's say I thought about 20% of the vallecula is filled with residue. You thought maybe 25% of the vallecula is filled with residue. We would be off by about 5%. But that 5% might actually be the difference between a categorical rating of mild and moderate, depending on the rating scale that we're being used, which could reflect feels like a pretty large difference in severity ratings, even though we're off only by a few percentages. So it seems to be a more reliable approach, and there's research to support that as well. And then lastly, sensitivity to change. So we want to be able to detect smaller differences between people and even among individuals over time. That's a pretty nice marker for rehabilitation. So we don't just want to know that someone went from maybe severe amounts of residue to moderate amounts of residue. We might want to be able to capture that they went from 50% of a structure being filled down to 45% a couple weeks later, down to 40% a couple weeks after that. Those changes wouldn't be reflected if we'd used categorical ratings likely. So those are the reasons. I think that the last point that I want to make is in the original VASES publication, we use visual analog scales, which can be challenging to use in clinical practice. We have a new study that was recently accepted for publication that looked at the concurrent validity of just using numerical ratings. So rather than using a visual analog scale, we found that we are just as valid and reliable if we say a number. So clinically, in our reports and when talking with colleagues, we could just say 20% of the vallecula is full or 30% of the vallecula is full. So I think it's also in a very intuitive way of actually describing pharyngeal residue, penetration, and aspiration. I welcome any questions and hope this helps you all. All right, take care.